We are so excited to have Kwame Mason with us today. He's a filmmaker. He's now working with the NHL. We'll just kind of start off with, your path in hockey and your relationship with it growing up and how you got into it.
So, as everybody knows, if you're born in Canada, you're born with a hockey stick in your hand. So I was born and raised in Toronto, and I'm a first-generation West Indian. So my parents were like, go out there and play with the kids, and they were all playing hockey. So that's what I did, and that was every day after school. That was on the weekends to sun up, sundown. And but for me back then, it was in that time when there was you had to pick a side kind of thing, and hockey turned into a guilty pleasure because my predominantly black friends were like, that's the white boy sport, and my white friends were like, black people don't play hockey, so you're in the middle there, and you're just like, I always loved the game, and it always had a place in my heart from the very beginning. To this day, I still own the hockey cards I had from when I was like 7 years old, 6 years old. So
yeah, amazing. Always loved the game of hockey. You said you put it in your back pocket.
Yeah.
Where did your path lead then? I read that you went into college for law enforcement.
Yeah. I was going to be a police officer. Again, just trying to find myself, and I was just trying to find something that I could just do that more would appease my parents and not really myself. And law enforcement was that. And around that time, there was that unfortunate incident with Rodney King, and that was kind of the thing that really, that was that turning point for me. That was that thing that made me look at the kids that were in my class and how they reacted to it, to myself and the other black students. And I was like, I can't do this. Like, I can't be a part of an organization where these could be my coworkers and they are justifying what happened to this man. So I just kind of, was again just trying to figure out what am I going to do, figure out what we're going to do. And I had an older brother at that time, and he was very passionate about what I like, the entertaining stuff that I like to do, and he had passed away. And so I think in honor of him, I was just like, I'm gonna go for it. And from there, I worked on a television show for 2 years, and then I worked in radio for about 14 years. And working in radio is kind of I would say that door that opened up for me to be in the place I am today.
Yeah, which is, I would classify you as a storyteller.
Right.
And I read that, in radio and stuff, you were working a lot in hip hop and rap itself. That's the storytelling. That's especially in the 90s.
My first interview was Jay-Z. And his very first album in 1996. That was television, but my first radio interview was Eminem and his first album. So I've always been music driven. Music has been in my life. I have an older cousin who was literally the first female rapper in all of Canada, and music has always been a part, and it kind of guided me, and and storytelling kind of falls inside to that place. Yeah. And really interesting, I worked at a radio station here in Calgary back in like 2001. It was called Kiss 969, and I was an evening DJ there, and I had never gone to a NHL game growing up, and my boss at the time was like, hey, do you want to go to a game? And he took me to a Flames game. And I remember seeing this young man on the ice, and he was just amazing, and I was just so blown away. And he wore number 12, and he had a captain. I was like, who's that guy? And he said, that's, and they were like, that's our captain, Jarome Iginla. And I realized, I'm like, wait a second, he's black. And he was like, yeah. And I was like, oh, and literally, again, that was another turning point in my life to really say, why am I hiding my passion for this game? I love this game. And that was kind of like another pivotal moment, real interesting moment for me to really embrace the game of hockey and embrace storytelling. And then, long story short, I went to Edmonton, worked at a radio station there, and I was around, the guys when they were having that cup run in '06, and one of my friends there was Georges Laraque, and he really inspired me to think about, making a film about black athletes in hockey.
So nice. But even going back to talking about Jarome Iginla, he often talks about how when he was a kid, they would tell him there's no black hockey players in the NHL. So he made it his mission to seek those out. Talking about representation and going into you making this film, was that the driving force? Is let's make sure that these underrepresented individuals, get out there, their stories get out there.
That's literally dead on. how you say that, because when I would observe George and we would be out at clubs and stuff with that, I always think to myself, I'm like, what must it be like to be the only black guy on a hockey team? I knew what it was like to be the only black guy working in a radio station, and I knew what that felt for me, so I always wondered what it was that for him. And around that time, there's a lot of young black players coming up in hockey. You were seeing PK Subban in the World Juniors, Wayne Simmons, all these guys were coming up, and I knew something was happening, but the one thing that was missing was the storytelling part of it. You know, if you talk to the majority of white hockey players, they could tell you about the Bobby Orrs, the Wayne Gretzkys, all these guys that were just very important in their lives. And I felt like black athletes never had that. And I thought to myself, there's a lot of stories in black culture and hockey that's not being told. So I was like, okay, I got to do that. And especially considering the Colored Hockey League of the Maritimes, which was around in 1895 to 1930. When I figured out I didn't know that, I thought, how many people didn't know that? So it was my mission to make sure that I told that story.
Yeah, and now you're working with the NHL. Mm-hmm. Just talk about kind of how that path led you to work with this organization.
Yeah, so I always say that I kind of bullied my way into, working with the NHL. So when my film was done in 2015, one of the first people at the NHL that wanted to see the film was Gary Bettman. And I think he more wanted to make sure that, what kind of caliber of, storytelling I had. So I sent it to him, and from there, they were really excited because it was something that, as Grant Fuhrer would say, I did the work for them. I told this story in a very passionate way that could help bring the awareness of black athletes in the game of hockey. And it just became a snowball effect, and I just kept bugging them and saying there's so many more stories we could tell, and so many different ways we can spin this and help bring in the black community towards the game of hockey. And so they allowed me to do a couple of things. I did something with Ryan Reeves a few years ago, and my latest project is Ice Queens, which is about black women in hockey, and that's something, again, that I was really, really proud of being able to bring to the hockey world.
Yeah, so you told the stories in Soul on Ice. Now you're telling the stories of women in sport as well. And what I love about Ice Queens is it's not just about the hockey players, but it's also about women that are making an impact in the sport at other levels, at the executive level, at coaching level. Yeah. Why did you feel that you needed to tell that story?
Well, the biggest reason why I felt the need to do that was when I was in Chicago doing a tour of Soul on Ice. We had a Q&A after, and this little black girl got up and she says, "Where's the black girls?" And again, we talked about this. It's like when you're doing a story, sometimes you can't fit in everything. And I felt like, even though you can't fit in everything, I wish that I gave a nod to the black women in the game of hockey. But what's also interesting about our universe is our universe tells us it will be what it's supposed to be. And I think today is the right time to tell this story, because there's so many black women, not just on the ice, but off the ice, behind the bench, and it's very inspiring. And I think a younger generation of young black girls doing hockey as a sport or thinking of it as a fan, they can look at this documentary and say to themselves, hey, there's many paths to hockey that I can fall in. And so that was the biggest reason why I wanted to make that film.
Yeah, all comes back down to representation.
Yes.
And back to the United by Hockey tour.
Yeah.
That's why you're in Calgary.
Yeah.
Just talk a little bit about that and what people can expect from seeing this.
Yeah, so it's, United by Hockey truck tour is an evolution from the Black History Month truck tour that we had a couple of years ago, which was, dedicated to the representation of black athletes and the contribution of black athletes in the game of hockey. And we felt that it was so important that there's so many more stories of underrepresented people in the game of hockey that we can tell and make the truck a lot more bigger and a lot more grander. So what people can find is a lot of information, like learn about people that are in broadcasting, people that are in the C-suites, black and indigenous, Southeast Asian, all different people that have participated in the game of hockey. And I think they can walk away with learning something new and feeling that our game is growing and that we can appreciate where we've been and where we're going.